There's a disease that's been plaguing every comment section, social media, and music review website for the past few years now. This disease comes in many forms, although appears on the surface to be a large population of music listeners who seem to have the exact same opinions on the exact same pieces of music. As we begin to further peel back the layers, the disease appears to stem from something circular in nature, donning large hipster glasses alongside a red or yellow flannel shirt. It becomes easier to find the culprits when you realise that it just so happens that these opinions correlate with the album reviews of a particularly bold, barrel-headed man. This man is of course Anthony Fantano, the host of the music review channel The Needle Drop, which in the past 15 years has become by far the most popular and influential music publication on the planet, with Anthony Fantano perhaps being the last bastion of music review-based journalism as a whole. But how has this happened? How has just one man with hipster tendencies been able to not only create the most influential music review publication in the modern day, but somehow also inspire a cult-like fanbase that is able to affect online music discussion in such a prominent way? In order to analyse Fantano as a critic and understand why he has become so psycho-socially influential to a large audience of music fans, we first need to explore his history with music and what led him to become the most influential online music critic despite having zero background in creating music. Anthony Fantano was born in Connecticut, with his parents going through a divorce when Anthony was extremely young. This resulted in him continuously moving around the country throughout his childhood, which actually resulted in him spending countless hours listening and focusing on the music the car radio would be playing during these journeys. He quickly became interested in music, although would base his entire taste off of the radio and MTV, where he would replay tapes on his Sony boombox. Fantano would develop other interests outside of music around this time, specifically the art of stuffing his big fat face with any piece of food he could get his hands on. The repercussions of this became obvious at the age of 15 when he had reached 300 pounds and was subsequently forced to lose weight through an extremely strict diet. This loss of weight resulted in Fantano receiving much better treatment from his peers than he once was, resulted in him making a decent amount of friends. Unfortunately, he chose the wrong friends, as it was these friends that decided to introduce him to nu metal and early punk, with Fantano becoming so enthralled into these genres and cultures that he became the typical teenage punk. This involved him growing out a greasy mohawk and remaining ignorant to any style of music outside of a certain genre or time period. He specifically became enthralled with the Dead Kennedys, a band that opened up Fantano's eyes to the potential quality of punk music. It wasn't just smelly individuals playing smelly riffs. The musicianship, political songwriting, and the unique vocal style of Jello Biafra inspired Fantano heavily, which led him to begin playing the bass, learning many of his first riffs by ear off of plastic surgery disasters. This punk phase wouldn't last too long, as most teenage punks either grow out of it or end up looking like this, living out of their shitbox and begging for cigarettes on the street corner. His stint at university would open his eyes to the full capabilities of music, leading him to begin exploring underground artists from many different genres such as hip-hop and electronic. His passion for music only grew, leaving him hungry, not only for more music and of course soy milk, but for a chance to somehow or some way make an impact upon the music industry. This opportunity would present itself whilst Anthony was at university. His professor recognized his passion and would help him get an internship at WNPR, where Fantano would pitch a radio show named The Needle Drop in 2007. The show's format would consist of a podcast where Fantano would listen to a particular record and subsequently share his thoughts on the objective qualities and shortcomings. What Fantano and every other individual working at the station didn't realize, however, is he wouldn't actually be able to play the particular music on the radio due to a lack of licensing, which immediately shifted the show into something that audibly more so resembled the modern day Needle Drop. Although the show was receiving backing from local radio, it was going absolutely nowhere. It seemed like there was a mismatch between Fantano's potential audience and the audience that were likely to listen to the radio. The average radio listener simply just wanted to hear something relatively catchy before they sideswiped a family of 5 in a road rage incident, and a nasally teenager reviewing the new Animal Collective album just didn't fit into this demographic. Fantano subsequently predicted the changing of the times and looked towards the burgeoning platform of YouTube as a potential future home for the Needle Needle Drop. He decided to record and upload a few video-based reviews in 2009, although once again was forced to change his format after receiving various DMCA claims for featuring clips of the actual music. This may all seem inherently negative for Fantano. No matter where he hosted his show, he was facing legal issues limiting his creative approach. Although this may be the case, it was only beginning to slowly inch Fantano towards a winning formula. He continued to post on YouTube whilst working at both NPR and a pizza place, although would actually leave NPR altogether after he discovered an article of his was given a clickbait title by an editor that misrepresented his opinions and intentions. Sounds extremely familiar. This would be a blessing in disguise, as it led to Fantano placing his full focus onto the Needle Drop YouTube channel and blog, alongside flipping pizzas of course. By early 2010, Fantano was able to amass 1,000 subscribers, and by late 2011 he was able to make enough money from the Needle Drop to move out of his parents' house. Since that point, Fantano has gone through many different phases, from a 4chan shitposting to an individual labelled as problematic by the mainstream media, to an angry, politically charged man who spends way too much time on Twitter. Regardless of these phases, Fantano and the Needle Drop has become not only the most successful music review channel on YouTube, but perhaps the most successful review publication in the entire world. So how exactly did Fantano go from Mohawk child to music review and divorcee? A lot of people, including Fantano, would just chalk this up to pure luck, although I think it's safe to say that influencers and creators don't become the most popular individual within their niche entirely by accident, and this is especially the case with Fantano, where it's highly unlikely that long-form niche album reviews will go randomly viral in the same way a cow getting hit by a train in India will go viral. This in turn means that Fantano has to have been doing something right throughout the last 14 years or so to reach the pinnacle of online music nerd fame. This could just stem from the fact that Fantano was the first prominent individual to present music reviews in a modernized online format on a platform as accessible as YouTube. This could make some sense, although doesn't account for Fantano's continuous growth, coinciding with the dwindling trudge towards irrelevancy that's becoming the fate for once iconic music review publications such as Pitchfork. There has to be a reason that Fantano's opinion is held in much higher regard than the equally pretentious Pitchfork or any other music review publication online. In order to understand why Fantano has become the man that essentially controls the online music discourse, we need to uncover what actually makes Fantano Fantano. If you're already well aware of his shiny slappable bald head, a few key terms may immediately come to mind: yellow flannel, melon, boy he thick, fatthany, headtano, an entire catalogue of visual and audio based Fantano memes that sound like they've come straight out the mouth of either a toddler or a millennial. These small phrases and memes may seem inconsequential to Fantano's overall appeal as a music reviewer, and just a symptom of his loyal fanbase and history with meme-heavy platforms such as 4chan, although I believe it's incredibly important to his overall appeal and differentiates himself as a reviewer more so than you'd think. Music criticism has been around for a very long time, and whether it be Plato criticizing music that didn't adequately improve society or education, or a Pitchfork writer shitting on Carly Rae Jepsen's lyricism, it's always been very similar in terms of its pretentiousness. Music reviews have always been for one of two types of people, one of which being somebody looking for a quality piece of music to buy, or the other being an individual who is heavily invested into music as an art form and industry. The prevalence of online music platforms such as Napster and eventually Spotify meant that the music review was only for the latter. The average music fan no longer needed a music review to see which piece of audio consumable slop they should buy from the record store. They could just click play instead. It subjugated the art of the music review to only people who saw themselves as extremely passionate or deep within the art form, which rapidly decreased its mass appeal. Fantano was able to counter this by utilizing the inherent aspects of YouTube to his advantage. The face-to-face format attached a brand to his reviews, with the brand being his big round head. This brand was then spread using thumbnails, with the comment section acting as a place for a discussion and a way to insult his huge head, with the consistent 4chan and eventually Twitter-laced memes spewed out by Fantano throughout the years, making his reviews perfectly aligned with the type of motherfucker that wouldn't be caught dead reading more than 200 words on a review website before getting distracted by a banner ad promoting Iranian dick enlarging pills. Phenomena similar to this has happened time and time again. YouTube and online content platforms are able to simplify art forms in a way that is extremely beneficial to reach and approachability credibility. For example, if you dropped me back in the 80s doing the exact same thing I do on this channel to a similar level of success, I'd be considered a journalist or documentarian, but being able to simplify it in a way that makes it suitable for the internet in the modern day just makes me a schizophrenic that spreads misinformation. By this I mean online platforms and the development of technology has returned these art forms to the everyman. Traditionally, a music journalist or reviewer was somebody in power, somebody who either had a history creating music within the art form or were established within print media. Fantano is neither of these things, and because of this was able to take advantage of the parasocial nature of YouTube to negate the old reviewer archetype, an archetype that realistically only scared away young audiences. Fantano went from spewing 4chan memes and reviews to crashing out over political musicians on Twitter, which regardless of how annoying either one of those things may be, is a character arc that I'm sure many people online can relate to. By this I essentially mean Fantano is a relatively young internet savvy meme spouting freakazoid, which is infinitely more appealing than Frederick Hasselbleider, who uses hyperbolic metaphors to emphasize the power of Taylor Swift's vocal style on the Guardian music review website. This links itself nicely with the review style of Fantano, how it differs from more traditional reviewers, and how it melds perfectly with the visual medium to be more appealing to the forever distracted online music fan. Instead of utilizing the previously mentioned hyperbolic metaphor or overly complicated analytical statement to describe a particular sound or style within music, Fantano takes advantage of the visual medium, letting facial expressions, tonality of voice, and visually humorous aspects describe the particular elements of the music in a way that's much more effective for most viewers than even the most talented of writers. The soy face will always be a more effective way to present emotions than an effectively written statement for the vast majority of online fans in the modern day. His reviews also offer a more simplistic approach, which I believe is actually due to the algorithmic limitations of YouTube. Fantano has put out a lot of reviews and continues to do so, giving him little time to overly analyze or read too deep into any album he may be reviewing. This not only makes the review oftentimes more approachable, but occasionally makes it ignorant and simple enough to attract some algorithm boosting hate, all whilst feeding this same algorithm with consistent uploads. If you do this for long enough with very little competition, it's inevitable you'll build a monopoly over the niche. Criticism towards any format or medium within art is bound to be divisive, and the needle drop is no different. The only big difference between Fantano and typical organized criticism is the fact that the needle drop is far more chronically online than the typical review platform, creating a comment section and reaction base that is far more heinous and degenerate. Fantano has managed to build a viewing base that presents equal adoration towards the critic as they do sheer hatred, with the passion of both reactions being much higher than the average online film reviewer, for example. So why is this? Is Fantano just annoying, or does music just attract more passion than other art forms? Well, depending on who you ask, it's both. I believe this response can mainly be explained by the way in which music-related audiences react to opinions and criticism, and how that links to the way in which music affects our brains biologically. Music alters our brain in a way that is unlike most art forms or even drugs. Reading a book or watching a film can be beautiful, and obviously the latter does use music effectively, but nothing lights up each and every part of our brain like a piece of music. It can essentially be seen as the most powerful drug in the world, and therefore has some of the most passionate reactions. This has created an online landscape that benefits Fantano massively. If he criticizes an album from an artist with a dedicated fan base, he gets a ridiculous amount of engagement through hate watchers and negative comments, and if he were to hail that same album a masterpiece, he would get the opposite reaction but very similar interaction and channel growth. What this doesn't explain, however, is the way in which the presence of Fantano has affected the online music landscape overall, and why exactly it's happened. Believe it or not, this bold little barrel body ass motherfucker has been able to cause a sizable dent upon music culture that still sees effect today. This can be defined by various different statements that are often spit out all over online music spaces.
I love this album, but Fantano hated it.
I love this album.
I also love this album.
Wait, we forgot to ask some.
It's as if it's common assumption that Fantano's opinion is at a higher regard than the average music fan, with the only thing that realistically places his opinion on a higher pedestal than a homeless crackhead is his platform, extensive record collection, and history listening to many different albums. It has just become a fact that regardless of your opinion of Fantano and his videos, the numeric score he slaps on a particular album does hold a huge amount of weight in terms of online discussion. It's reached a point where particular albums and artists are completely disregarded due to a number scribbled and edited onto a screen by an autistic bald man. It removes something that's integral to a subjective art form such as music, the individual opinion. Although I suppose it can be argued that Fantano spitting out his absolutely abhorrent takes on music on a regular basis has allowed for a culture that encourages others to do the same, which would suggest the encouragement of opinions, but from my experience it's more common to see individuals shitting on bands Fantano hates, glorifying bands he gives out yellow flannel scores, and continuously peddling the Fantano opinion as something more than just an individual's opinion. This common Fantano-based opinion can then seep into online music review websites such as Rate Your Music, changing the overall score and therefore reach, affecting the overall opinion of a particular type of music. It can easily be seen through his 10 out of 10 scores. Although it's highly likely that artists like Kendrick Lamar and Charlie XCX would still see huge amounts of success regardless of Fantano's 10 out of 10 score, I think it's more unlikely that bands like Daughters, Swans, and less so Death Grips would see the same amount of online support from Zoomers if it wasn't for Fantano's score platforming the bands to his entire audience. This can quite clearly be seen as a positive, introducing the music to a larger audience, although when we view the flip turn, it's clear how this can become an issue. The negative scores can often cause an almost seismic flip in opinion. Certain artists will be ridiculed and future projects may be even disregarded entirely based off of the back of an arbitrary score provided by a bold man. This brings us to one of the main issues with criticism of art. The piece of art in question, in this case being an album, takes more than just the time and resources spent creating the album. It takes a person's entire identity and history to that point, only to be summed up for the general population 8 hours after its initial release and given a score that will stamp its legacy online for months or even years. I suppose this can be seen as a negative for Fantano, and it is clear that each and every person that becomes overly famous and influential online has some sort of negative aspect to their character, content, or the consequences of either of these things. I believe that one of the big negatives surrounding Fantano and his reviews more links itself to the consequences of the content coming in the form of something I call the cult of Fantano. The cult of Fantano defines the way in which his die-hard fans act and treat music, and how that affects and can potentially be a detriment to the industry in the future. Due to the comedic and visual aspects of his videos, alongside the fact that he was the first to create appealing online reviews, and in turn has become by far the most popular, has created a sort of aura surrounding him for a small section of his fanbase. This in turn creates an online mob of sorts that regurgitates his opinion whilst acting elitist towards anything that Fantano may not review positively. This wasn't particularly an issue earlier on in the career of Fantano. He was just mainly seen as a meme and received respect from niche online communities, specifically 4chan, for many of his views and takes. This in turn packaged the opinion of Fantano with the opinion of 4chan's music board. Although his cult-like fanbase didn't present itself early on in his career, I do believe that it was this time frame that planted the seed. If you were a slightly nerdy, highly autistic, chronically online individual curious about music in the 2010s, you typically got your recommendations from two places, 4chan's music board or Anthony Fantano, with these two sources crossing over considerably in the early days. These two sources introduced countless individuals to what is considered by many as typically good music, you know, this type of shit. It shaped the taste of many music fans and allowed them to branch off into whatever bitchless genre of music they would eventually choose. This can suggest the idea that Fantano is almost a nostalgic figure within online music at this point, a mainstay that is instantly recognizable and easy to consume, making him primed and ready for an incredibly sheepish following. Older fans would treat his opinion as gospel as he helped them find cool music earlier in life, and any fan after that point would just join into the already sheepish culture of the fanbase. People always have an urge to find and discover new music, with Fantano making that as easy as clicking on a video and checking the description for the score. They can then use the scores to form a personality and music taste based on what has to be good and quality because Fantano says it's good and quality. This brings us to a valid question. What is inspiring this behavior? Is it the criticism or is it simply just the score? Fantano utilizes the 10-point scoring system, rating each album on a scale of 1 to 10, and then utilizing the adjective strong or light to emphasize its position in that particular score. He also occasionally utilizes a not good or unreviewable rating, but that is quite clearly utilized for clickbait, so we'll ignore that when discussing this particular point. The 10-point scoring system has always been an incredibly simple way to summarize a piece of criticism or opinion on a particular piece of art. The critic can construct an argument as to why a certain piece of art makes them feel a certain way and what particular qualities that piece of art may have, and then assign a number at the end to neatly organize it into a level of quality. It seems to make perfect sense, and when the number-based score is connected to the detailed piece of criticism and not presented without reason, it does work. The problem begins to arise when we realize how cooked the modern generation is in terms of attention span. It seems that even Fantano's fast-paced, soy-face friendly style of reviewing is too much for some people, with many individuals familiar with Fantano clicking on a particular review, immediately scrolling to the description, reading the score on its own, and forming an opinion based on that. This in turn becomes a big issue for that particular piece of art. By no fault of his own, Fantano has essentially simplified a piece of art, regardless of its complexity, into just a number, with the meaning of each number-based score also beginning to become diluted. In a perfect world, an average album is 5 out of 10, and anything above that should be considered quality in some way. Unfortunately, we live in a world where critics get doxed by Swifties for giving a Taylor Swift album the horrendously low score of an 8 out of 10. It's reached the point where everything that doesn't receive a score of at least 7 out of 10 or above is thrown to the side and ignored by a huge portion of online music fans who continuously drone the opinion of Fantano on various other music review websites. In my eyes, an album that is a 5 out of 10 for one person can easily be a masterpiece for somebody with different tastes. The 5 out of 10 suggests that it doesn't lack in terms of the more objective aspects of the art, such as mixing or production, with the rest being up to the listener to interpret for themselves. A consistent misinterpretation of what review scores actually mean, with even the power of a said review score being up for interpretation, makes it difficult when criticism is ignored or not taken with a pinch of salt. This raises the question, is Fantano or art form based criticism even needed in general, or is it just one big negative? This negative sentiment towards music criticism in general has been spouted by a huge group of people in the past, but I do believe it's something that for the most part benefits the quality of the particular product. If we were to look at this banana, for example, if a popular banana critic were to criticize this banana, the banana farmer may attempt to work on growing a better banana and attempt to make bananas of the same high standard after a glowing review, resulting in a world full of happy monkeys and many quality bananas. If that banana reviewer has a particular relationship with his monkey audience, even better, the monkeys are able to trust the critic's opinion on the banana, and if that said critic is able to articulate why they like the banana whilst soy-facing at the thought of more bananas, the banana criticism is likely going to be more beneficial to the banana industry. Obviously, bananas are less subjective than music, as I've never met somebody who doesn't like bananas, but you get the point. Educated criticism towards any art form can in turn be beneficial, as it creates a particular standard. There are, however, clear arguments against this point, coming in the form of the concept that musicians pay literally zero attention to reviews and simply create the art they want to create based on their personality and history on this bitch of an earth, which in turn negates the benefits of the review. This does make sense, and I highly doubt most musicians pay much attention to this bold man, although this point does avoid the nuance of the situation somewhat. Fantano's reviews push more traffic towards albums that are for the most part high quality in some way for some people, giving these artists more growth alongside a sustained listening base. This then lets the record labels know that there is a market for this particular music, or gives independent musicians more funds to continue to create. This allows for the creation of more music from that artist, regardless of how experimental it may be. An example of this is Igloo Ghost, who saw a huge boost in followers after an extremely positive review from Fantano. Since that point, he has been able to continue creating some pretty batshit insane, incredible electronic music to a steady, although passionate fan base who consistently support his work. Trusted reviews allow for fans to find and put a stamp on what particular aspects of music they may like, citing the particular review as the origin of that decision. That then in turn introduces more fans to particular genres of music that they may enjoy, injecting health and money through passionate fans into these more niche genres, which allows artists to then just create more. The thing is, criticism and reviews are everywhere. Review websites, comment sections, communities. Any opinion on an album online can technically be considered a review. The internet has made criticism much different in the modern day, as opposed to when Frederick Dinkelbert reviewed the Velvet Underground in 256 AD. Quite literally everyone is able to be a critic, so what makes Fantano different? The issue is, most online criticism is stupid. One-word memes or biased reviews from people who only listen to one format of music. Fantano is different in the fact that he approaches every genre of music with the same level of respect, with each of my points earlier in the video contributing to why Fantano's level of criticism is beneficial to music in general. It doesn't matter whether the album is grindcore or power pop, Fantano will approach it in the exact same way, utilizing years of experience listening and analyzing countless albums to criticize the album in a way that's more educated than you, me, and the vast majority of online music fans. He is also held to a particular standard due to his platform and the amount of people who watch him. Although he occasionally misunderstands particular aspects of albums, it is in his best interest to not do that. He will approach a project with the utmost respect and fairness due to the amount of eyes on him. Well, this is the case if you are in fact not a heinous person. This brings us to an aspect of Fantano I have begun to notice in the last few years or so. He seems to lack the ability to separate the art from the artist. A clear example of this is Kanye West, the man who's known in the present day for selling only the most tasteful of t-shirts. Fantano has morphed from giving Kanye fair reviews to slapping an unreviewable status upon many of his newer projects, with much of the pretense behind the anti-review being based on his heinous behavior and how that is reflected upon the album. This is a difficult topic to discuss and analyze. It's clear that the actions of a particular individual can change the way in which the art is analyzed. Kanye's music is clearly less uplifting and more sexually disgusting due to his actions, and the aggressive elements of the band Daughters is almost disturbing to listen to when learning about the heinous abuse allegations towards frontman Alexis Marshall. Refusing to review or mention these artists is a respectable and understandable perspective to have, although seems to be a relatively new opinion for Fantano. If we go back 14 years or so before the Fader article put Fantano on blast for enjoying Pepe the Frog, Fantano seemed to be more than happy reviewing the work of notorious racist and literal murderer Burzum, even mentioning how he was able to listen to and analyze Burzum whilst ignoring the ideologies of Varg Vikernes and many aspects of black metal that promote negative ideologies. Fantano in just over a decade has gone from praising the artistry of a literal murderer like Burzum to refusing to listen to or even recognize internet trolls such as Negative XP. This change in perspective can quite clearly be chalked up to Fantano growing as a person and perhaps morphing with the times politically, although it does seem to portray Fantano's slow trudge towards the mainstream and how that has affected his channel overall. In that same Burzum review 14 years ago, Fantano would actually promote a smaller singer-songwriter before beginning the review for the more famous and of course notorious artist. This desire to continuously promote smaller artists whenever possible seems to be slowly reducing when watching Fantano's newer content. I've noticed this through various different things. His YouTube shorts, for example, mainly present topics that reside completely within mainstream hip-hop. Many of his newer reviews focus on the mainstream more so than they used to, and political statements, specifically statements shitting on right-wing politics, have become common within reviews and a lot of Fantano's content. People are allowed to change their opinion over time, although this immediate shift from 4chan memeing freakazoid to politically educated Twitter user occurring within the same time frame as the Fader article is slightly suspicious. Would pre-Fader Fantano use memes, humor, and loud screams to criticize obviously politically retarded songs featuring Ben Shapiro, or would he present his ideas through serious commentary? It's hard to tell without having a big old rummage round that big head of his, although I do believe this shift in opinion and content highlights a trait of modern day Fantano. He is no longer counterculture and can be truly considered mainstream. Early on in his career, Fantano was the underdog, consistently criticized by more established review websites, which allowed him to take up spaces within niche niche online counterculture communities. Nowadays, that couldn't be further from the case. He is by far the most popular and influential music journalist within culture, which is of course going to change the way in which the content is created and presented. There is a looming question, however: can this shift towards the mainstream be considered a negative? I believe the truth is more nuanced than the clear positive or negative. The fact that an independent singular figure, mainly present on a platform like YouTube, is the most popular music reviewer is great, although the fact he quite obviously morphed his content and persona due to criticism from established journalism is less positive. Fantano's ability to introduce people to new music is fantastic, although the fact that his popularity has created a cult of drones who affect the online music discussion landscape is less positive. As in the case of all creators and influential online figures, it swings and roundabouts. And let's be honest, it isn't that deep. A bold man giving his opinions on albums doesn't affect the world that much. I just wanted to make this video so I had an excuse to yap and, more importantly, edit his big bold head into as many cursed scenarios as possible.